Hi everyone and welcome to day two of our Life School Challenge. Yesterday on our video we talked about expectations, the science behind it, why it's important to be aware of and pay attention to our expectations. A lot of times we're not even aware that those expectations are at play. We just think this week's going to be better than the last, when perhaps it's not. So we talked about setting expectations in a way that would increase our dopamine levels, guarantee success, and then we can feel happy and successful and we can build on that. So keep managing your expectations. I really loved your posts today. Maya, yours was my favorite, and I'm stealing that for tomorrow. I loved that expectation. So um, you, yeah, keep going with those, because if each morning you're kind of aware of what am I expecting today, is it all of the things we talked about. Today, however, we have a different topic. So for tomorrow, your assignment is going to be around routines. And routines, in my opinion, are a superpower in both parenting and in teaching. And it's gonna be really hard for me to keep this like in the least bit concise, because there's so much that could be said about routines. I'm just gonna kind of pull out my favorite golden nuggets. You may already have a routine that's working great for you. Awesome. And if you don't, you may be able to improve routines or understand why it's working or why it's not, just based on some of the science that I'll share today. But why is this so important? The human brain enjoys efficiency. And if an experience is satisfying, we will repeat that experience. So we want to create efficient and very satisfying routines for our life school. Okay? There's a couple of things that we need to know about the brain and about humans. Number one, willpower is finite. So we want to spend our precious energy wisely. And the way we set up our routine can kind of help or hinder how we use our resources. Now, we're adults, and so cognitively, we have some more developed skills. Our frontal lobe is more developed, our prefrontal cortex, so we can plan a little bit better than our kids. We can predict outcomes a little bit better. We can do things like that a little easier than they can. And if you're anything like me and you have children with neurodevelopmental differences, ADHD, seizure disorders, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, there's lots of different differences that our kids could have. That makes schoolwork especially that much more taxing. And so their precious willpower is going to be drained a lot more quickly than you might expect, because it just takes that much more energy to engage in a task that's academic, for example. And at home, you may not be used to having to do a lot of academic tasks. And so the stamina they have for something like a sport or an instrument that comes easy to them is different than the stamina they're going to have for something that's a little bit more taxing on their cognitive system and is a mismatch for how their brain works. So just hold that in mind, and it kind of explain to us why in some scenarios our kids do so well, and in other areas like academics they might struggle. One of my favorite books on this topic, if you want to do a deep dive, is called Atomic Habits. And a quote from that book is, "The goal is to get to a place where a choice that once required effort is now automatic." That is how we lower the cognitive load during the day, so that that willpower that's finite and that motivation, which is finite, can be used for the hard tasks and not be drained on things that could be efficient and automatic, like a habit or a routine. So some examples of effort that is being required when there is no routine: there's a lot more decision making that has to happen. In a routine, you don't have to make a decision about what you're going to do next. There's just a schedule and a flow. We chain things together, so there's no decision making happening at all. It just is automatic. Task initiation is another thing that happens over and over and over again throughout our day. And a routine can help lower the cognitive load and make that automatic. Debating over the parameters, the rules, the boundaries. Have you ever tried to start a new routine in your house And you get all the questions, like you're going to change the technology rules, and suddenly it's like, wait a second, what about this? That's not fair. This happened. If we don't have a routine, every conversation is open for debate. Whereas a routine becomes something that operates outside of our awareness, it's automatic. So we don't think, hey, wait a second, that's not fair. What about this? Those debating and arguments taxes both you and your child. And so if we're not having a routine in place, we're going to spend a lot of our precious energy in debates. Verbal comprehension and understanding what's expected. When you're setting up a routine, there's a lot of instruction and guidance that has to go on so that your child understands what's expected of them. Once a routine's in place, though, we can take away that whole verbal interaction of having to explain, teach, and understand. And if language processing is not one of your child's strengths, that's a real relief to their cognitive load, to have something that's automatic that doesn't require verbal interaction. And last, it's just the attention and focus on the steps. When a routine is new, or we don't have a routine and it's all novelty, new stuff, there is a lot of precious energy wasted on just having the attention and focus you need to do something that's new. Automatic routines don't require that amount of attention and focus. So you can just see there, that's 5 different things that if you don't have a routine are going to be draining energy away from the things we want to save for the hard stuff. So if we have routines, we have comfort, we have predictability, we lower anxiety levels, and we free up a whole bunch of cognitive space for the stuff that's really important. So that, I think, is why I think it's so important. We want to streamline, we want to lower that cognitive load. If you are doing life school, with kids that have any neurodevelopmental difference at all, then you will notice the difference of routines on their stamina and what they're able to do. The overwhelmed mind says no. And the brain that is in fight, flight, or freeze says no. Freeze is I shut down and I will not even talk to you about reading because I'm going to get overwhelmed, so I'm just going to put up the stop sign. We don't want that. We want a free-flowing river where things are automatic and easy and achievable. Okay, so how do we build a routine that works for you? I'm going to give you some basics, and then I like to think about it as like a toolbox, like setting up a routine for kids, which is what I do at school. Like if a child is struggling, then I go in and we figure out how can we modify this routine to make it work for them. And that takes some tinkering. Like you might try a couple things before you hit on the thing that really seems to work. So think of it as like an experiment. You're like a detective, and you're going to take your tools in there and you're going to fiddle around with stuff until you find some stuff that works. Okay? Here's some considerations for building routines. Number 1, what's the natural rhythm of your home? This is where I want us to look at our expectations and not compare to other people. Because we get in our heads that Susie Q down the road has this homeschool thing all dialed in and set up a certain way, and if I don't do it that way, then I'm not as good as they are, or I'm not as good of a mom or something. And we want to get that off the table. What's the natural rhythm of your home? Because that's what will work for you. If your kids are sleeper inners, then you might not want to start your routine at 8 a.m. You might want to do a 9:30 start time. And sure, maybe other people are up and done before that. Great. What's the stamina of your kids? You know, if you've got kids with learning differences, you may want to concentrate the academic time into the morning where their willpower is still up and running and leave the afternoon for the fun stuff. You know, there's not a right or a wrong answer. You're going to think about your strengths, your children's strengths and interests, and the rhythm of your home, and you're going to think what will fit with you. You're going to manage your expectations again because new routines require persistence and flexibility. I always say in parenting and teaching, most things are a paradox, which means they're conflicting and they're both true. And it's like being on a balance beam. So you have to have this balance of flexibility and persistence and structure. You're going to watch for unrealistic, rigid, and unworkable expectations. and start with a routine that has a high probability of success. So if you've got the high-flying, overachieving academic kid, you can probably start out with really high expectations because you're pretty confident that they'll be able to meet those. If you have a child that you crack a book and they run and they scream at you, you might have different expectations and you might start somewhere else. So those are some of the things that we're going to look at. And I want to share some behavioral laws with you to consider when you're building your routine. And these are going to be things that you can incorporate into your assignment for tomorrow. There are 3 things to consider when you're building your routine. Make it visible, make it attractive, make it easy. Okay? I'm going to go through each one of those. So how to make our routine or our schedule or our habits visible. Visibility is all about the dopamine burst. We want to use that dopamine to increase the likelihood that our children will engage and repeat these patterns and have them become a routine. If they're running the other way, it's going to be hard to make a routine out of it. If they're not having fun, it's going to be hard to make a routine out of it. If everyone's crying and yelling, it's going to be hard to make a routine out of it. We can harness our natural brain chemicals, dopamine, to increase the likelihood that our children will come back to the table the next day, okay? So visibility is important. We want to maybe use a visual schedule. You can get real crazy and do Velcro squares. Just search on the computer visual schedule and you'll get all these icons that come up, and you can Velcro that and get real fancy, or you can do what I do, which is just write a list down with little boxes next to it. You can make a checklist. We know that there are dopamine bursts when we achieve a goal. So having a list of, for example, my daughter Taylor this morning had reading, she had a math problem, she had writing, she had a music thing, and so we just did each box, 2 15-minute reading boxes, and I kind of let her choose what order she wants to do the stuff in. We schedule a break of the fun stuff in the between, but she takes that pen, and every time she marks off something that she just did, that's dopamine. And so for kids that have more academic skill and interest and they find it fun naturally, you can give them longer, harder, bigger tasks. For kids that won't come to the table at all, like you might put come to the table on their list. You want to get things that they're going to get and make it visible so they can check it off. You might have things in your house like a calendar where you're marking off every day that they get their reading done, or those little links, the countdown links, and you might take one off each day, but it's visible and it's showing their progress. Or you could even add a link every day that they do some expectation that you're pretty sure they can meet. You could have a marble jar or something tangible and visible like that out on your counter. You could do what, like our school does, Eagle Eyes. So we have Eagle Eyes that we made at home. These are all visual ways to show your schedule, to show your routine, and to show what's expected. And they all help with that dopamine burst. So you want to make your routine visible. Number 2, you want to make it attractive. What's in it for them? Why would they want to do this? Again, when we're enjoying ourselves, we release dopamine and we repeat those behaviors. So you want to stack highly desirable activities in with the less desirable things, okay? So the Premack principle, like the first then, is very, very helpful in doing that. Eating the Frog, that's a book, Eat the Frog, do the hardest thing first, and then follow it up with something that's really exciting and preferred. Because as we know, anticipation of reward, like video game time, like bike riding, like hoverboard, like painting mom's nails, whatever it is that your kids really get excited about, you do a first then. First, the frog, the thing they don't want to do, followed up by the thing that they love. Now, you can modify that. In 2 days, we're going to do something all about modification, and I'll go into detail about how you can modify for different types of learners. But the first then is a great thing to make it attractive to them. You also want to consider the 2-minute rule. You might need to simplify your routine where it feels achievable. Can they do it in 2 minutes. So instead of the goal being you're going to do all your work, the goal is come to your work area. And then there's some sort of little visual check off, something that makes them feel happy and good. Then there's habit stacking. After blank, I will blank. You want to create a chain of behaviors in your routine, a chain of things that happen. After breakfast, I will listen to the read aloud. After I get dressed, I will go to my work area. And you stack those behaviors and you create a chain and a routine that is automatic. And bingo, bango, bongo, you've got some really good routines in place. Then I want to make sure, what's the last one that I want to talk to you about? Yeah, we talked about eat the frog, do the hard stuff first, and then pair it with a highly desirable break or reward activity. We also know that for most people, and I always say most because Lord knows there's always, half the time I have the child that like everyone says, oh, this always works. Well, no, it didn't work for me. So I say most people have their cortisol and all of the stuff. Their morning is going to be their most efficient time to get hard stuff done. Because willpower, motivation, and all of that is finite, by the end of the day, people tend to be lower in that. So if you can do the hard stuff first, that helps. But also keep in mind that a lot of kids need a transition activity from free time to school time. So that's why when kids go to school, there's often some sort of a transition activity when they get into the room. You know, there's a routine. They hang up their jackets, they put their coats away, they come to the carpet, and there's a story. They come to the carpet and there's class meeting. You can do a transition activity in your home as well. That is the signal to the brain to shift from me, independent time, I get to choose what's happening, into school time. It uses different brain functions, okay? So that's a signal, a good transition activity. And repetition's your friend, so try to keep consistent. But when you're starting a new routine, there is sometimes the need to tinker. And when something's clearly not workable, you may abandon that, right? And you may try some other things. And then I always say, read the room, people. Read the room. You need structure, you need routine, and you need flexibility all at the same time. And if something's not working, don't die on that hill. It is better to have people have some dopamine released, feel good about what they're doing, have expectations be met so that they come back to the table the next day. So you don't have to say it's because of their behavior, but you know how I read the room. It's like if people are starting to go like this, and the head is on the desk, and there's the whining voice, like I might just decide that the schedule for that day had a surprise in it, which was movie time, which was we're going to go gather nature's treasures in a bag. Like have some things in your back pocket that if the room goes south, you've got something else that you happen to have planned that they're actually going to love. You go out and you do that. You don't lecture, you don't punish, you don't get everyone in trouble. You just read the room well enough that you can swoop in with your rescue routine if you have to, okay? So I talked about a lot of stuff. And if you have to go back, that's okay. I want you, for your assignment tonight, to think about some of those laws of routine and behavior. Look at the routine you already have going and see where you can try something new. Whether that be making something more visible, making it more attractive, or making it more, I forgot the third one, more simple and easy. Those are the things that we're going to look at. Is it visible? Is it attractive? Is it simple and easy? And if you can think of a way you already are incorporating that other people might find beneficial and helpful, awesome. I get my best ideas from other people. I'm a stealer. I'm an idea stealer. So share away. But I want you to talk about routine and something that you're either going to try or that you are already doing that is really exciting and that you're excited about. Okay, so you're going to post that in the comments with the hashtag LifeSchoolDay2, or Life School Challenge, anything that lets me track you that way. And tomorrow we're going to talk. During the day, I'll post some other stuff. I loved hearing all the comments and conversation today. That was super helpful to me. And I'll post some other things. Tomorrow, we'll talk about another common pitfall, which is task initiation. So we've got our routines. We've got people going to the right places at the right time. How do we get people to get started when they're resisting? There's some good tricks for that. So I'll share that tomorrow. And again, if you are struggling, and these are just kind of like tip of the iceberg conversations, sometimes we need a deep dive, and we really need someone to get in there with us that's experienced and tinker around. Try this, try that, let's talk this through and figure out our next steps. I have limited one-on-one coaching spots available. You can hop over to Learning Without Limits, Trisha Thompson MS. That's my business page on Facebook, and you can book now on that page if you're needing that level of support. Happy to do that with you. And it doesn't even need to be ongoing. Sometimes it just takes 30 minutes of someone listening, hearing it, and going, oh yeah, that happens in my house all the time. Here's our next steps. Let's figure out a next step for you. Okay? So I'm looking forward to it. I'm finding this really fun, and I'm finding it actually really beneficial to myself. Today I caught that expectation that this week was going to be better than the last. And then I went, yep, that's one of those expectations that has a really good chance of making me mad and going south. So I loved that shift. I'm going to pay attention to my expectations tomorrow too. And I'm going to be looking at our routines and thinking how I can make them more visual, simple, and attractive. And I'm going to think about how can I streamline and lower the cognitive load, because people are dealing with a lot right now. You're dealing with a lot, your kids are dealing with a lot. So there's already taxation going on there where we're taxed more than we normally would be. So, and then we're expecting them to do all this new stuff, which novelty requires more effort mentally. So we want to help streamline that process, and that's what this stuff can do. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it, and tomorrow we will be talking all about routines. So can't wait to hear what you have to say. Bye.